Hello everyone, welcome back to Tau Zero SF, and I'm Keith Fletcher, bringing you another book haul. Now, in my city of Calgary, there's a big event going on called the Big Calgary Sale, or the Big Calgary Book Sale. It's a 10-day event being held by the Rotary Club of Canada, and it's actually a charity event that's selling books to help with kids' literacy programs across southern Alberta. And I really wanted to go today because it was fill a bag for $20. That, and I wasn't able to go for most of the week due to work. But I think it was worth it today. Because if this is what they had for 9 days into their event, I have no idea what I've been missing. So the first one I have here, I was really excited when I saw this one. And remember, everything I'm going to show you was $20. There's a $3 entry fee for the event, so $23 altogether, but the entire box of books, $20. The Big Book of Science Fiction, edited by Anne and Jeff Vandermeer. And if you know who Jeff Vandermeer is, he wrote the novel Annihilation, which became a movie of Natalie Portman. This, I'm so excited to read. Lots of very good authors here, but a lot who I don't know. And there's authors from other countries. I'm very curious about science fiction, and I should really just say SF, in other countries, especially the Spanish language countries, because I've read some Japanese science fiction stories, one or two Korean ones. I have no idea what's going on in the rest of the world. This will be very helpful in finding out about what's happening in Latin America with science fiction, what's popular, and naming some authors. Damon Knight, Off Center. This is published by Award Books, and it's a collection of short stories. And on the back, it says, The Six Senses of Damon Knight, which, that means there's 6 stories in here, because it's going through the different senses. There are only 5. What the heck? But it's because the last one, Through the Senses, they talk about Damon Knight's writing style. So a little bit misleading. Can't wait to read this. A for Andromeda by Fred Hoyle and John Elliott in a Corgi edition. And its sequel, The Andromeda Breakthrough, in a Fawcett Crest edition. Now, I know about these because obviously I'm a Doctor Who fan, but the first Doctor's granddaughter, Susan, played by Carol Ann Ford, she was in this series. It was a BBC science fiction serial in the, I think, 1960. And these are the adaptations of that serial. And I know there's a Gaun's Masterworks of this set, but these are great vintage copies. Clifford D. Simak's They Walked Like Men. But they were a race of fantastic aliens determined to conquer the Earth without weapons. This is probably my favorite cover in this whole box. It looks like someone's bleeding from their mouth until you realize it's people going into the mouth. What a concept. I absolutely love that. It's an alien invasion tale. A bit like, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Good stuff. Can't wait to read. Robert A. Heinlein's Orphans of the Sky. A lot of people on the Sci-Fi BookTube have been talking about this book. Very thin. I know it's 2 novellas combined together. And I really need to start reading some more Heinlein. I've really been putting off reading Heinlein, not because of any of his politics or any kind of controversy he has. It's just more like I've owned some Highline for years and just never got around to reading it. So this will be my first introduction to Robert Highline. Another one I was excited about. Brian Lumley's The Spawn of the Winds. Now, something like this should have been snatched up, especially with the popularity of paperbacks from hell right now, because this is a Lovecraft mythos novel. Even though it's set on another planet, where, oh, I can't pronounce it, Ifakwa, who is the Wendigo wind god in the Cthulhu mythos, he set up residence there. And if you know Brian Lumley, he wrote Necroscope and the Necroscope sequels, the Titus Crow novels. Really can't wait to read it. It is also a Grafton with the HarperCollins imprint logo. So this is probably before they rebranded as HarperCollins. Chronicules by D.G. Compton in an Arrow edition. And Richard over at Vintage SF, he talked about this book. I was really interested in the concept. Found a nice Arrow edition of it. Everyone's been going on about D.G. Compton lately, and wanting to read it has gone straight to the top of my list. This is actually going to be like one of the first novels I start reading when I start making some reviews. Now, in the last one, there were some John Carpenter adaptations, and I found two. One being a Del Rey edition of Dark Star, John Carpenter's first movie, and adapted by Alan Dean Foster. And yes, this is an image from the movie. And the second one, who published this? Bantam, in a special book club edition, The Fog, adapted by Dennis Etchinson. And I love this movie, so I can't wait to read an adaptation of it. If you haven't seen John Carpenter's The Fog, it's a fantastic ghost story. It's not as scary as some of his other films, but it is chilling. Now, if you've heard of Harlan Ellison's Medea, or Ellison's World, as it's sometimes called, Medea Ellison's World, it was a bunch of science fiction authors coming together to make a shared universe world for one of the best anthologies. I don't own it, but I do know in that same kind of vein, the Nebula Award winners wanted to do something similar. So Robert Silverberg helped publish Murasaki, a novel in 6 parts, where he edited it, but everything was written by Paul Anderson, Greg Bear, Gregory Benford, Brian Brin, Nancy Kress, and Frederick Pohl. And that is fantastic. Really looking forward to this. I remember an old episode of Prisoners of Gravity, which was a Canadian, not really a talk show. It was more like an interview series with science fiction authors back in the 90s. This was one of the subjects of the episodes along with Medea. Until I find Medea, this will be what I'm reading first. The Einstein Intersection by Samuel R. Delany in an Ace edition. Quasar by Jamil Nasser. I don't know much about him. I know he's a Palestinian American who was writing science fiction stories in the early 80s, and this is late 80s, and this is a 1995 edition, and it's his first novel about a psychiatric about a psych. You know what? There it is. You can pause the video to read. The Broken Sword by Paul Anderson. Outlaw Bookseller talked about this book. I'm not a fantasy fan, as he says, as there's a Labyrinth poster behind me. But at least in the written form, I've never really been into fantasy. I hope this changes my mind about fantasy. And it's in a Del Rey edition. Now I'm really excited about this. Kim Stanley Robinson's Ice Henge, published by Ace. First paperback edition of 1984. Ace original. I've been seeing this on Amazon, and I'm worried it might be like a print-on-demand edition, so finding a vintage copy. And I've read the Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson. Really can't wait to get into this one. I cannot believe I found this. J.G. Ballard, The Terminal Beach, Penguin Edition. And it's in pretty good shape. There's a big crease here. That's okay. Spine's unbroken. Copyright of 1964, and this is a Penguin reprint edition of 1974. And it's a book of short stories that Ballard wrote. And it probably has the best description on the back that I've seen. The crystal world of J.G. Ballard, where the white light of reason bends and breaks into every shade of fear, ellipses. 12 chill splinters of unreality. Tells me nothing, but it also tells me everything. That's a weird concept for it. Like, what is with this image on the front? What are these stories? How are they spine chilling? And I know Ballard can be hit or miss with some booktube reviewers. I'll give him a shot. M. John Harrison, Settling the World, Selected Stories. He's a big new wave author. He's still alive. And this is some of his stories collected that go from 1971 to 2020. This is a comma book. Now, I own this in a movie tie-in edition, but H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, Oxford World's Classics. And this is based on the text notes. I believe this is based on the first edition. The text is from the first edition of 1894. Now, there was a revision, and that's what I have originally of 1931, where the 16-chapter format of the original novel was reordered slightly, reduced to 12. But this is how a Victorian would have read it in the 16 chapters. And it's been about 15 years since I read The Time Machine. Really want to reread it. Have a sip of LaCroix, not sponsored. I just work in the movie industry sometimes. Da, The Hero of Danways by Michael G. Coney. This is the only Coney I found out in the wild. I think everyone just buys them. Unbroken spine, not that faded at all. Yellow text block, very cool. Zena Henderson, or Zena Henderson, has been going around on BookTube with the SF reviewers. Finding one of these out in the wild, especially, I think it's her fourth book of short stories, Holding Wonder, really makes me want to get the other three. I know Richard of Vintage SF, he talked about one of the copies. I don't think it was this one. It's about children from another world who come to Earth and trying to get help from adults, I believe. Would you trust this child? You know what the dark-eyed children are? That's what it reminds me of. But I believe her writing style is kind of Ray Bradbury-esque. That sounds very interesting to me. Cannot wait. And it's an Avon edition. Louis Shiner's Frontera. I know Outlaw Bookseller put me onto this one in one of his videos. I think it was his Mars Top 5 SF novels. This is a Baen edition, and it is a first Baen printing of August of 1984. That was a month before I was born. That is fantastic. I know this is one of the in Stephen Andrews' Outlaw Bookseller video. He says it's probably one of the best hard sci-fi space opera books he's read, and that's going right to the top of my reading pile. Don't know anything about this author. Chris Boyce, Catchworld, Panther Edition, published by, well, the winner of a Gowan's Sunday Times SF Award, with a nice Chris Foss cover. Unbroken spine, a little bit of fading. It's very nice. If any of you know anything about Chris Boyce, let me know down in the comments, because this seems intriguing. Catchworld is a superb science fiction novel in the mind-blasting tradition of 2001. Space Odyssey, Space Death. Now, I love Nigel Kneale. Like when I was a teen growing up in the 90s and I discovered things like Doctor Who, I also discovered Nigel Kneale's Quatermass series, especially with the first Hammer film, The Quatermass Experiment. And I've owned for years the Penguin editions of Nigel Kneale's screenplays for those original television serials. Serials, not serials. What am I talking about? But that's okay, because I found from Comma Books Tomato Cane and Other Stories by Nigel Kneale. And this is his, or it should be, his complete prose works. Now, this is published in 1949. Originally published in 1949. It won an award. I think it was the Somerset Maugham Award, which you have to spend the money on from the award by traveling and broadening your horizons. Can't pay your bills with it. But these are weird tales, folk tales, ghost stories. And I can't wait to read them, because I love things like The Stone Tape by Nigel Kneale, Beasts, which was an anthology series about horror animals. They're on YouTube, watch them. And with an introduction by Mark Gaddis that I read on the way home, this makes me really excited to finally get into this. Hardcover, or hardback. And it's a proper first printing of Robert Silverberg's Lord Valentine's Castle. Published in 1980, and it does have the 1 at the end of this. It's in great shape too. It only just has a little tear on the cover, but that's fine. I don't complain that much. Barrington J. Bailey's The Pillars of Eternity, Daw. Fantastic spine. I can't wait to start reading Barrington J. Bailey. Everyone seems to absolutely love him as a new wave author. And he's no longer with us. Fantastic cover. A novel about how clones made murder a new sexual experience. How rebuilding one man's skeleton made him the most sensitive and powerful man in the galaxy. How a deck of cards was devised that was really programmed to reveal the future. How Lost Planet became the mecca of every treasure hunter in space. How Hakeem Boaz plotted to derail the entire universe. It's exciting Nova science fiction by the author Michael Moorcock calls the most original SF writer of his generation. There is no one else to match him. A Daw Books original, The Pillars of Eternity. A novelization of The Day the Earth Stood Still by Arthur Tofte. And I believe he was a Golden Age science fiction writer who stopped writing to become a copy chief for, I think, an advertising firm. He returned to SF back in the 70s when he retired. And this is a Scholastic Book Services edition with some stills provided by Forrest J. Ackerman of the film. And the original short story, I don't think it's actually published anywhere. It's available for free online. I love the movie version, Robert Wise, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Definitely check it out when you can. But can't wait to read this. It's one of my favorite SF movies. No introduction. Neal Stephenson's Cryptonomicon. I think a lot of people know it. I've never read it. Never read anything by Neal Stephenson. I've seen this for like 20 years everywhere. Got a copy. Spine a little crooked. That's okay. This makes it easier to read. Someone else has already done that. I don't break my spines. Brian Aldiss, The Interpreter, published by Signet. With a copyright of, it's the first printing by Signet, February 1969. I think Stephen Andrews at Outlaw Bookseller, he called this a very good book with grotesque, disgusting aliens. I mean, he's not wrong, but it's a novel about reverse colonization, or well, that's just colonization. Human interaction with extraterrestrials, but the extraterrestrials have come here. In his introduction, Brian Aldiss, he says he wrote it as a response to what he saw in Indonesia and India and thought what would happen if the reverse occurs. Can't wait to read it. Two Tanifleas, Don't Bite the Sun, and Drinking Sapphire Wine, both published by Daw. Both fantastic spines. Nice yellow bookends. And I don't know much about Tanith Lee. I just had people rave about her, like when they read her books. These are the only two Tanith Lees I own now. Let me know in the comments which one I should read first. I'll be very curious. Samuel R. Delaney's Driftglass, published by Signet. This contains I and Gamora. This is a first printing from Signet, 1971. Lean, crooked spine, but you know what? As long as the pages aren't falling out, that's all I care about. I mean, I'd rather have, a pristine book that doesn't have water stains like this, but it's in good shape. It's a good reading copy. The Star Fox by Paul Anderson, published by Berkeley. Voyagers in Time, published by Temple Books, edited by Robert Silverberg. These are time travel stories ranging from the Golden Age to probably the 60s, I believe. Five Star. I've never heard of this company. I own another book by Five Star. And this is Brian Stableford's The Days of Glory. Novelization of Saturn III by Steve Gallagher. And I believe the screenplay originally was Martin Amis. I I shouldn't like Saturn III because I find it really stupid, but the production design on this film is so great. It's a Stanley Doonan film, and he did Singing in the Rain. I think he was brought on as a director for hire for this. It's a killer robot on one of the moons of Saturn, Saturn III. Harvey Keitel is like a bad guy. Kirk Douglas is the hero. There's Farrah Fawcett. It's silly, it's dumb, but I love it. So, getting to read it in written form, fantastic. Mind Players by Pat Cadigan, Bantam Spectre edition. I love this cover. I want this on my wall. I want a poster. And this is a, cyberpunk-esque novel. Pat Cadigan, of course, wrote Sinners, one of the big cyberpunk books. Look at this. I just noticed the back. I don't want to bend it too much because the spine's great, but what is happening here? I want to know. Novelization of War Games. Published by Dell? Yeah, published by Dell. Great movie, hopefully good book. The Glass Hammer by K.W. Jeter. Signet edition, cyberpunk novel. I think this is one of the sequels to Dr. Adder, which I cannot find anywhere. Unbroken spine. Very nice bookends. Fantastic shape. If you've read any W.K. Jeter, let me know in comments. I'm very curious because I own Noir, one of his newer books, came out in the early 2000s. Should I read more? Should I try to find Dr. Adder? Robert Silverberg's Roll Inside, hardback. Apparently a first edition from, or behind a desk, being kept behind a desk at a bookstore. It says first edition 1971, Doubleday. Now, this is important to me because what got me back into reading SF novels in general about 5 years ago was I picked up just a jackless hardcover copy, book club edition of The World Inside, and I fell in love with Robert Silverberg's writing. This is a novel about overpopulation, except people want overpopulation. They all live in giant towers that go into the sky and just have non-stop orgies to produce children. And this is the consequences of that society. What are the morals? What are the ambiguities? What's happening outside the towers? Cannot explain enough how much I enjoyed this book being pure SF. Pure American New Wave. Do yourself a favor, get a hold of this copy. Well, maybe not this copy, but get a hold of a copy of The World Inside. I know there's a paperback you can find on Amazon. I don't think it's print on demand. Love it. Paul Anderson's New Wave, Ballantine. Inverted World. I found this in the general fiction section. And it's a New York Times Review of Books edition. Lots of people are loving this book. I've never read any Christopher Priest. Cannot wait. A. Van Vogt, The House That Stood Still, a paperback library edition. The Bracket, a Ace edition of Alpha Centauri or Die. You can see why I'm so excited. All this so far just for $20. Now, this is the same book, but two different titles. I had to get both. Brian Aldiss' Starship, Avon edition. Originally published in the UK, and this is a Faber paper covered edition, non-stop. Not in the best shape, and there's a coffee stain on the back, but I love Non-Stop better as a title than Starship. It's a generational Starship story. Love Brian Aldiss so far from what I've read. I'm going to hang on to these. Dark Voices 3, the Pan Book of Horror. And this is a 90s response to like the Pan Books of Horror that they've been producing for about 30 years at that point in the UK. And these are some modern stories. Ramsey Campbell is here, Bob Shaw is here, Brian Lumley, Charles Wagner, Robert Hood, Basil Cooper. I also love horror. I don't read much horror, especially the short stories outside, like, the big ones. So finding some more obscure horror writers, especially now after Paperbacks from Hell has made horror unattainable for a lot of people. I'm going to read this maybe next month, or maybe I'll save it for October. He really wants his copy of Necronomicon there, but I have a copy. Michael Moorcock, Avon edition, the Cornelius Chronicles, Final Program, A Cure for Cancer, The English Assassin, and The Condition of Music. Omnibus edition. I know Moorcock's very popular. I love the livery. I don't know when I'll get to that, though. Brian Aldiss, Cryptozoic, Sphere Edition, X Library. Not great shape, but for the price, I couldn't disagree with it. Brian Aldiss' Equator, New English Library, Unbroken Spine. Oh, some creases, but very good shape overall. Big dumb object in the sky. What's going on here? A fantastic A. Van Vogt, Earth's Last Fortress, which I believe is 2 novellas by him. Completely Unbroken Spine. It might be a Chris Foss cover. I'd have to check, but this video is running long and I want to hurry up. Published by Sphere, if I didn't mention that. The Gamesman by Barry and Malzberg, published by Penguin Books. Barry Malzberg again, Tactics of Conquest, published by Pyramid. Not very good shape. Spine's okay though. And a blue text end. Michael Bishop, Stolen Faces, published by Dell. Creepy. Report on Probability A, Brian Aldiss, Sphere Edition. Unbroken Spine. Absolutely lovely. Adam Roberts, Stone. And Sci-Fi Scavenger, he talked about Adam Roberts recently. And I think Outlaw Bookstore too. I really wanted to read something a bit more modern, and this seemed up my alley. Bob Shaw, Ship of Strangers, Ace Edition. Love this. I'd have this as a poster as well. Bob Shaw, New English Library, The Shadow of Heaven. Unbroken Spine, a little bit of wear and tear. Looks great though. D.G. Compton, Synthojoy. This was another one that Richard over at Vintage SF reviewed. I think it's the only Ace science fiction special I own. But not a lot of people talk about Compton until uh, Vintage SF talked about Compton, the Not Well Bookseller. I think Matt had book pilled. Can't wait to get into Compton and just start reading everything he's written. Speaking of, that's your Crocodile, published by Arrow. The Best of Judith R. Merrill, published by Warner Books. And this is an author I'm really excited about. Having a powerhouse female author, one of the best, edited so many anthologies, especially England Swings SF, compilation of the new wave coming out in the late 60s. Great psychedelic SF cover. Man the Maze, Robert Silverberg. Not my favorite kind of livery. I don't like this late 70s editions of Silverberg that Avon did. This guy just looks like he's chilling, listening to his headphones. But this is a book I've been wanting for a while. But same thing with Nightwings, been wanting to read it forever. Late 70s edition, don't like the font, don't like the livery. But Unbroken Spine, and all that matters is the interior contents. I can live with that. Robert Silverberg's anthology of Alpha 8. Yeah, published by Berkeley. Ballard's Vermilion Sands. 3D glasses included. And I found this in the general fiction area at that book sale. And the 3D glasses are still there. And I took them off to look at the cover, see if it's actually 3D. Maybe. I didn't really notice much. But it's an edition of Ballard's short stories, all set in Vermilion Sands, an automated desert resort luxury hotel that will fulfill your most exotic whims. Kingsley Ames, The Green Man. Now this is a ghost story, but I've seen this miniseries that the BBC, it might have been ITV. No, it was BBC. Made in the early 90s. It's a 4-part miniseries about, well, the legend of the Green Man, the mythology of the Green Man in the UK. I remember it being very creepy. I did not realize it was a book. And I found this in the mystery section. I think out of almost anything here, this surprised me the most. Cannot wait. I'll save this for October. James P. Hogan, Code of the Lawmaker. Theater of Timesmiths by Gary Kilworth, published by Unwin Paperbacks from the UK. Cover art by Tony Roberts. Gary Kilworth is a name that I've heard on some sci-fi book channels recently. Had to pick it up. John Brunner, The Crucible of Time, one of his bigger books, published by Dell. Cat Carina, Michael Coney. Okay, so there were 2 Michael Coneys in here. The svelte bodies of the Felinas were irresistible and strictly off limits for human men. The Felinas had a wonderful time. Ooh, scandalous. And that's an Ace edition. I had to get this. Unbroken Spine, Stand on Zanzibar by John Brunner, published by Dell. Just a little tear on the cover, but otherwise just perfect. One of the more famous books about overpopulation. where I think at the time the entire population of Earth would have fit on Zanzibar if it had the average square footage of Tokyo. Published in 1968, this is a sixth printing of June 1976. Barrington J. Bailey, The Forest of Peladane. Daw Heroic Fantasy. Had to get Bailey. So I own 2 Baileys now. Anthony Burgess, The Wanting Seed. Published by Arrow. This is a near future book. Not too pleasant future where there's a world where man may. Sorry, it's been a long day, especially hauling these books around. Is a world where man's most grisly nightmares have become reality, where change is constant but never for the better. Extravagantly funny and grimly serious, The Wanting Seed is a vision of man's self-constructed fate that is as brilliant as it is compelling. So it's probably about a totalitarian government taking over Britain. Now, I did pick up Michael Moorcock's The End of All Songs last time. I had to get all 3 of them of that trilogy, The Answers at the End of Time, in this livery, published by Avon. These are so beautiful. And finally, the last ones, and I'll show them like this. Del Rey's and I think one Ballantine of the Best of series of Lee Brackett, Cornel Maynard Smith, Raymond G. Galland, Murray Leyster, Philip K. Dick, John W. Campbell, and C.L. Moore. Getting these, especially after Richard of Vintage SF, Matt at Science Fiction Reads, and the third guy's escaping me right now. He's great too. Sorry, I wish I could remember his name offhand. It's been a long day. But getting these, really happy with them. I'm loving their episodes that they're doing, going through these one by one, talking about the stories and the authors. I really enjoyed the Lee Brackett episode. So finding this one in particular, and Lee Brackett, working with Howard Hawks to bump up the dialogue in some of his movies, working on The Thing from Outer Space for Hawks, and being one of the original scriptwriters for The Empire Strikes Back. This is going to be the first one I read of these. And that's it. $20 for all this. Lots of great finds. I don't know how long it's going to take me to read this. I might be done with book hauls for a while. But we all love book hauls. And a bit of bragging about all these wonderful titles always makes people want to go out there into the wild and find them. So the more we can just spread, Stand on Zanzibar, J.G. Ballard's Vermilion Sands, Cryptozoic by Brian Aldiss. Getting those out of the bookshops, out of the thrift stores, and on people's shelves in their homes, especially for their collections, that's going to help people expand their knowledge and make for an impressive set. So, without further ado, I'm Keith, signing off from Tau 0SF, and look forward to my first review. I'm turning another room into a recording studio, and you all have a great day. Cheers.